Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for accepting to be part of this program. I enjoyed a lot. You know that I'm a fan of your work, and I really love this film, particularly because of its innovative approach to give everybody an introduction about Kelly's work. Kelly's an animator, documentary filmmaker, experimental filmmaker, and your work has a range of different modes from documentary, experimental, film essays, and it's not limited to one mode or method. For this particular film that you employed all these techniques, that was very impressive, and I showed it in my classes, and I showed it to my students. I think it's a master class, and when I showed it to them, I usually emphasize on these different aspects of it, on how to present an important topic like this, women resistance and socio-political topics in a very artistic form, and employing all these methods. You incorporated found footage, animation, essay, and even you started with a very poetic, mythical narration that was very fascinating and immersed the audience into this beautiful world. And then you start scratching them with all those stories and raise awareness around this topic. So I let you to talk and walk us through your process, how you usually come up with a structure, and particularly about this work, how did you come up with this structure and this topic?
Yeah, thank you so much, Soudabeh. I'm so honored and excited to be talking with you. I'm also a huge fan of yours, so this is really exciting for me. Thank you so much, and thank you to Manya as well. I have been interested in histories of political Irish resistance for a little while now, but I was far more familiar with some of the prison strikes that some of the men in Ireland had organized, and I was familiar with what's called the blanket protests that many men went on, and I was familiar with the hunger strikes and this big figure in radical Irish history, this man named Bobby Sands. So I had been more familiar with those histories for a while, because I think they're way more written about and way more shared. And so on a trip to Ireland with some family a few years ago, I was in a little bookstore, and my younger sibling found a book that was like, you might be interested in this, and that led me to learn about the book. Explored what the women in the prisons were doing to oppose and resist the violence of British colonialism. And so that book I was reading on the airplane coming back to the States, and started to become really really curious and hungry to learn more about specifically the role of women political prisoners in the colonialist jails, and the ways that they were creatively resisting, and their stories and histories, which are far less shared than those of the men's. And so that was kind of the early beginnings of me kind of learning about this story about the women's no wash protest at Armagh Jail. And once I learned about that story, it didn't leave me. It stayed with me. And I was like, I'm sure this might be something familiar to you too. As a filmmaker, sometimes you learn about something and it sticks with you, and you can't stop thinking about it or let it go. And so I knew that this was also a moment in my filmmaking practice when I wanted to start to challenge myself and push myself and try new things. I think it's it's exciting and it's always good for us all to push ourselves and challenge ourselves at different moments in our artistic careers and our creative practices. And I wanted to do more, using film more. I've used film, a lot in my practice before, but more so found footage and coloring on and animating on film, but not shooting 16. And so I got to work with with a great cinematographer, mutual friend, Vasilios Papineau, who was the DP for the 16mm portions of the film. But during that trip, during the trip to Ireland that I took some years ago, when I got that book in that bookstore and learned about the women's no wash protest, I was shooting a lot of like live action animation on my DSLR. Just as we were traveling around, I was with my younger sibling and my father, and we were exploring like all of Ireland. And I would take my camera out and shoot like a ton of photos, almost again, like kind of stop motion, like animation, like a bunch in a row as like the wind would blow and whatever else. And so those segments are in the film. They're the beginning and the closing kind of segments, that kind of like stop motion animation. And so, yeah, it's funny because I think when you work in an experimental fashion, it's really like a liberating way to work, because you kind of are exploring the structure of the story while you're in the process of making it. So you're like trying different things out, you're seeing what works, you're seeing what doesn't. It's a very exploratory way and playful way of kind of working, which I enjoy and appreciate. And so originally, I thought maybe it would just be the 16mm and Super 8 that Vaz and I shot. And then I revisited some of that really interesting kind of stop motion footage that I shot, and thought that might be a good kind of entryway in and then like exit back out at the end. And while I was learning and researching more and more about the no wash protest, I was listening to a lot of historical Irish language music. And I was listening to this music while I would be editing and researching. And then I started to be curious, like, what are these songs about? And so I did like a deep dive into the lyrics of some of the music that I was listening to by this singer, Kelly Gallagher, who shares a surname with me and is from a part of Ireland in Donegal, where my ancestors are from. And that's how I learned the story about that kind of tragic but interesting opening myth or story about the mermaid who, when she finds her tail, she returns back to the ocean, leaving her family behind. And I thought about these women who some of them left everything behind to fight back against the terror and the violence of British colonialism. And I thought specifically about this one woman, Mary Farrell, who at the end of the story, without giving everything away, she returns to this group of radical women fighting back against British colonialism, leaving everything behind. And I just am really in awe and inspired by individuals who are able to risk everything for what they believe. And so, that kind of opening song ended up kind of in the film almost accidentally, again, because like I was saying, and then I'll stop, but when you're an experimental filmmaker working in this way, I think you're just always, you remain open. It's like open to whatever ideas might come in and come out. And again, you're willing to try stuff out without fear, which is exciting. And you can see what what ends up working and what doesn't. And there's a lot of magic, I think, in that kind of a process. So I didn't go in knowing exactly how everything was going to be laid out. It's kind of like you're figuring it out while you're working on it, which is exciting and can be scary too. But I think, is a fun way to work.
Yeah. Everything was chosen very carefully and beautifully and worked out really great. You answered some of my questions. Basically, I wanted to ask about music and the Mermaid story in the beginning, but you answered those. But my other question is your presence in front of the camera. Manya experiences in her work as well. Your presence and the metaphoric recreation of those women inside the prison. You experience this in your other work as well. We see you a lot of time in front of the camera representing something or reenactment that you create to tell a story. How did you come up with this arrangement or having yourself and the other reenactment that you have throughout the film?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually find it really scary to be on screen. I find it intimidating to put, it doesn't come easy for me to put myself in front of the camera. But I think again that there's something about, like, if you, how do I say this? It's almost like claim this and this story to be significant, and like can't let go of this story that's sort of resonating inside you. I almost feel like I owe it almost to kind of truly immerse myself and think through and reenact and become a part of thinking through what this significant, intense history means. So that's part of it. And I wanted to have these to show, so much about this story, really. I mean, it's called, of course, We Had Each Other. And it's really about how this sisterhood among women, and this story specifically looking at, of course, these women in Ireland, but as we know, in recent years, like the ways that women globally are women and non-binary folks in sisterhood with one another against so many struggles and participating in so many struggles together. This act of collective resistance, of not being alone, like visualizing that on screen and having these women being together, physically present, and that act of reenactment felt so crucial to exploring the heart of the story. Again, there's two words in the film that are in the Irish language, and I don't translate them for the audience. I just let them be there. The one means resistance and the other means sisterhood. And I think that sisterhood, like they say, there's a quote at the very, very end of the film, the credits roll up, and if you stay long enough to the end of the credits, you see Mary Doyle say this quote from her about, when we had nothing else, we had each other. And so having that kind of physical presence and that collectivity and that sisterhood made visual was really, I think, really crucial, because that's really the crux of how these women survived.
Yeah, exactly. As I mentioned in my notes, and explained it over there as well, your structure mirroring your content as well, the way that you work with 16mm layering and this collective material is a kind of a mirror or metaphor for this collective resistance. And it expands to all people and all women all over the world, not only a certain part of the world. And I think everybody with every culture or every background, when they look at your film, they feel empowered, and they get the message and conveys the emotion and the feeling of the theme and a topic that you had in your mind beautifully, without even being pushed back by the structure of expressionist or experimental form that sometimes make people to just stay away from the film, but you invite people to watch, enjoy, and reflect and contemplate. So I really appreciate what you did with this work, and I hope everybody can get this chance to watch and contemplate